In this video, we're going to look at tables. You may already be familiar with inserting a table. You go to Insert, Table, and then you can select how many columns and how many rows. As you move the mouse around, you'll see in the Word document how many tables and rows it's going to insert. So let's insert a fairly simple table, 4x4. We'll type in a little bit of content to each one of these tables. Using Control-C and Control-V, I'll just copy and paste the content across the board. So now we have a table with content in it. It's pretty ugly at this point. One of the formatting options with tables is to right-click and go Table Properties. And then under Options, we can adjust the margins of the cell. This is one way to improve the aesthetic display of a table, is to increase the margin. Let's just increase it to 0.2 centimeters on all sides of the cell, top, bottom, left, and right. And we'll click OK. And now you can see we've got a bit more spacing around the cell. It's starting to look a bit nicer, but still a little bit bland. So what we'll do is we'll change the background of each second row. I'll select that row, just using the mouse, and I'll right click and go to Table Properties. Again, this time though, instead of Options, I'll click on Borders and Shading. I want to shade the background of that row to be a different color. So I'll click on the Shading tab and I'll choose a light gray to fill it. Okay, so now we have a light gray. The row below, I'll do the same, but I'll make it a darker gray. So I'll select the row, I'll right click, Table Properties, Borders and Shading, and I'll choose a slightly darker gray. And if I want to repeat that light gray, dark gray pattern all the way down, just watch what happens. If I select the text from the left-hand side and I go Control-C to copy, and then I click down here and I go Control-V to paste, it just pastes the normal content, doesn't bring across the background shading. But if I select from the right-hand side, what we're telling Microsoft Word is we want to select not just the content in the cells, but also the table and all its properties. And I go Control-C and I click down here and click Control-V. Now it copies across that formatting. And I can just repeat that light grey, dark grey formatting. Still looks a bit clunky. So to fix that, what I'll do is right click on the table, again go to Table Properties, and this time I'm going to get rid of this border. I'm going to make it white so it doesn't, it's currently set to black. I'm going to make it white. So I'll go to Borders and Shading, click on the Borders tab, and with the color I'll select white. At the moment, the width of this border is 0.5 point. I'll make it a bit thicker. I'll bring it up to 3 points. So we'll click OK and OK. So now you can see that we still have a border, but it's white, so it blends in with the background. And it's a much thicker border than it was previously. What I'll do is I'll go Control-Z to go back a step so you can compare this with what was previous. You can see the difference. It tends to look a bit nicer. As one final step, I'll select this text and I'll make it, instead of black, I'll make it a dark grey. So now you can see our table looks really nice. Compared to what we originally had, which was this ugly table here, this one is nicely spaced and nicely formatted. When we have a table, if we want to get rid of some lines, all we need to do is select the line, right click, and say delete cells. A pop-up will ask us what we want to delete. In this case, we want to delete that entire row. So we'll go OK, and that row's gone. We'll do it again. Select the row, right-click, delete cells, delete entire row. But what if we don't have enough rows and we want to insert more rows? Well, there's two ways to do this. One is to right-click and go Insert, and then we have the option to insert rows above the current line or below. Let's go above. You can see it's inserted a new row for us to type into. Or we can right-click, Insert, rows below, and again, we've got a new line. But you'll notice that it hasn't continued our light, dark, light, dark, light, dark color scheme. So the second way that we can add new lines, and probably the way you'll use, because this will keep the color scheme going, is to select from the right-hand side 2 rows, click Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste. And you'll see that we've got an extra 2 lines. And if you keep pressing Control-V, you'll just keep adding extra lines. If you don't want a few lines, select them, right-click, delete cells, delete entire row. Keep in mind that when you select the rows to copy, if you select from the left-hand side, that's not going to add new rows. It's just going to copy-paste the text across to the new cells. You have to select from the right-hand side to copy the actual rows. So far we have considered how to insert a table, how to right-click, go to Table Properties, Borders and Shading, how to change the border color as well as the border thickness. Under the Shading tab, how to change the background of the cells. And the other setting that we looked at was under Options, and it was changing the margins within the cell to be a bit wider, and that's increased that spacing around the text. Most of the time, let's just delete this. Most of the time in the Lloyd's documents that you'll be editing, the table is actually within a text box, not just plonked onto the page. And that means that we can move the table around easily. So let's do that. Let's insert a text box, as we did in a previous tutorial. And we'll make this text box a bit bigger. And we'll delete what's currently in the text box. And then we'll insert a table within the text box. So we'll click inside the text box and we'll go Insert Table. So now we have a text box that we can move around, and the table is inside that text box. Why that's important is if we just inserted a table just onto the page, it's really difficult to move that table around. So by inserting the table into a text box, it gives us the ability to freely move it to any spot on the page we want. Then, of course, we need to format the table. So I'll quickly go through those formatting options again. First of all, we'll right-click, go to Table Properties, Options, and we'll increase the margin of the spacing between each cell. Then we'll go Borders and Shading, change the color of the border to white, change it to a thicker border, say 3 points, and then the shading will make a light grey. So that's changed all of the rows. Now we just select these 2 rows, Table Properties, Borders and Shading, and make it a darker grey. Then we'll add in some test text, and we can select that and make that a dark grey. Finally, we'll want to remove this outline of the text box because it looks a bit ugly. So we'll edit the text box, we'll right click on it, click on Format Shape, and then we've got our fill options and our line options. So we'll expand the line options. Instead of solid line, we'll select no line. So now we have a nice table, no weird border around it, but if we click within the text box, we can move it around freely on the page. We can put it in the corner, put it to the side, wherever it makes sense. So practice using tables. It's a good skill to know how to format a table, not just for the Lloyd's documents, but for any Word document that you ever edit. As with the other features that we've looked at first, this may seem a bit tricky, but as you practice it a few times, you'll get really quick and really good at it.